There's a real belief in the military that personal friendships between Egyptian and American generals can handle any bumps in the road.
I would say that there's a very cautious optimism that it will work itself out.
What is that based on?
I think that's based on our, now this is a military view, based on our knowledge of the Egyptian military.
An in-depth knowledge that's been fine-tuned over 35 years. It seems to keep the Egyptian generals assured there will be little consequence for their domestic repression. It's backed up by commitments from the Pentagon to keep the military aid flowing. I'm on the Department of Defense website doing a search for contracts meant for Egypt. It looks like there were at least 3 large contracts that were awarded to Raytheon, General Electric, and BAE Systems in July and August. And that's after the coup. The Pentagon wouldn't talk and directed us instead to the US State Department.
I think we've been very, very clear that we condemn all violence. And the president was clear as well that business as usual cannot continue with Egypt when people are being killed in the streets.
Right, but there was a defense contract of $13.7 million that was awarded to Egypt on August 12th.
I'm not familiar with that.
This was awarded by the Pentagon. Same day you said at the press briefing that the U.S. was very deeply concerned about the potential for violence. What's the rationale in awarding this contract on the very same day that you're saying you're very concerned about violence?
Well, the first point is I don't have the details of that contract in front of me. I actually can't confirm that, so I'm not going to respond to something that I don't have the details on.
Are the State Department and Pentagon working at odds with each other?
Not at all. I also can't speak for the Pentagon. So again, I'm not familiar with that specific contract you're referring to, so I'm not going to speak to it.
If the State Department doesn't know about the details of America's military contracts with Egypt, and the Pentagon won't talk to us about it, what is the reality? We decided to commission further research on U.S. arms shipments before and after the coup. The results? There's been a steady flow of nearly 2,000 tons of American military equipment to Egypt since July 3rd. At least 8 container ships carrying defense materials left the American ports of Baltimore, New York, and Norfolk. Their destination? The Egyptian ports of Damietta and Alexandria. Business as usual. Shortly after the coup, the U.S. announced it was suspending the delivery of 4 F-16 fighter jets to Egypt. But in Cairo, there was a sense that the action wasn't especially punitive. In fact, it might have been designed to have a minimal impact.
Does not really affect the deployment of military force domestically or locally. I think the US is aware of the fact that Egypt already has a surplus, especially of the tanks and maybe the jet fighters as well. And it doesn't really need it unless it's going to throw an all-out war or an alien invasion.
About weapons, I don't think we will suffer now. We have already airplanes, tanks. The American one still believes that Egypt is important for the United States and also for the region.
So important that they've given Egypt the 4th largest fleet of F-16s in the world, and no shortage of American tanks.
I hear that the last shipment of M1A1s is still in boxes, essentially. Thousands of tanks and a big number of jet fighters.
If halting the F-16s and cancelling Bright Star won't make a difference to Egypt, then what could the U.S. do that would have an impact?
If we were to reduce the part of the assistance that provides consumables, that is spare parts, replacement parts, to keep what they've got running, that would be much more serious. And as far as I know, we haven't done that yet.
He's right. The U.S. hasn't stopped the supply of parts.
Things break, things fall apart in the military world. Stuff wears out much faster than it does in the commercial world. And so therefore you need a constant supply of parts.
So American-made equipment requires American-made spare parts?
Yes, it's not that easy to go from one supplier to another supplier. You can't go buy it off the Russian shelf. That gives you a certain amount of leverage. The leverage really isn't the money. It's the stuff that the Air Force or the Army is providing to keep the current equipment going.
And that's exactly the stuff they keep sending. Faultline's investigation found that the bulk of the arms shipments from the US to Egypt after the coup consisted of spare parts for the F-16 jets, M1A1 tanks, and Apache helicopters the Egyptian military already has. Just before we went to air, the US announced it would freeze the supply of jets and tanks that Egypt has a surplus of. Spare parts, counterterrorism support, and military training would continue as before.
The United States will at times work with governments that do not meet, at least in our view, the highest international expectations, but who work with us on our core interests.
They tend to prioritize seeking stability over condemning abuses. And I think this was one of those occasions where you can see how short-sighted that policy is.
Once again, the military is seen as the best guarantor of stability in Egypt. The consequences have been grave. Hundreds of people are in prison, and violence on the streets continues.
It's very difficult to talk about political space or even about politics in Egypt right now because that space is being very, very tightly controlled and constantly narrowed by hardline security services who are really winning.
There's a possibility that this situation will continue to be like that. And if that happens, then what they haven't been able to do for the last 2.5 will be achieved, which is a return of the police state in the proper sense of the word, not just in the sense that the police is brutal, but in the sense that police has near total control over political life.
Cairo has fallen silent, and for many, fear prevails. Sarah Farid lost more than her husband Mahmoud on August 14th.
في الآخر مش حاسة برضو بالأمان للآخر في بيتي. مش حاسة بالأمان فوق مع بناتي. هما فقدوا باباهم، ممكن في يوم من الأيام يفقدوا مامتهم. إحساس إن أنا يعني لما أقول رأيي ممكن أتقتل، ممكن أعتقل بأي ذنب. ادخلي أي بيت دلوقتي ما بنتكلمش في السياسة، ما خلاص.